This week's Radio Hour is a fascinating story, narrated by Dr. Susan Warmfoot. Susan Warmfoot. Susan Warmfoot. Over a year has now passed since 4,163 students, all alumni of the same academic year, soiled themselves at exactly the same time. It was the greatest incident of simultaneous mass hysterical defecation ever recorded, a great mystery to the local paper and to this journalist, Dr. Susan Warmfoot. This was the kind of story that would only come once in a lifetime, but it didn't come handed to me on a silver platter. I had to dig for it. It was early June. My cousin had just shat himself at the local Tesco. This was most certainly not characteristic of his usual clean slate demeanour. He had ran out of the store with both hands clasping the stream, sullying himself along with his previously clean slate. He failed to plug his billows bowel gravy in front of all of the locals at the store, most of whom he knew very well at a personal level. It was chaotic, violent, and as he would later say, I was genuinely scared I was going to shit my head out. Following the incident, he was understandably far too embarrassed to go back to the local Tesco, the place wherein he had shat. Which is why he subsequently had started shopping at Asda, hoping a similar incident would never occur. Maybe it was something to do with Tesco, he would reassure himself. Maybe it's the fans, it must be the fans, he surmised. Little did he know that this story would turn out to be far stranger than any one man shitting himself violently in public. This is where the story begins. Asda. Gary Coalminer was also shopping at Asda that day. He was trying his best to make his shopping add up to exactly his budget, hoping and praying that his wife would stop calling him a twat on his return. He had fallen on hard times recently after losing his job at Tesco, where he had worked as a cleaner. Yeah? He had refused to clean up 3 poo-related incidents at the store while on shift and was subsequently sacked on the spot. He had told his boss that he was very unwell that day and that he had to go home, but his boss of course didn't believe him, when in fact Gary was telling the truth. Because Gary too had shat himself that day at exactly 3:49, just like all the others. However, when Gary found himself in the tropical isles of Asda, catching up with an old schoolmate, who happened to be my cousin, Stewfish Casserolio, he decided to leave that soggy detail out.
I wasn't going to clean up 3 simultaneous shits now, was I?
He told my cousin, who has asked for anonymity in this matter.
3 incidents,
said Stu, who is my cousin.
You had to bring professional cleaners. It was like someone had dragged an upside-down chocolate fountain through the store.
My cousin would later go home that night and wonder, maybe it wasn't something wrong with him. Maybe this brief moment of horror wasn't his fault at all.
It must have been the fans,
he thought.
If it happened to 3 other people at the exact same time, it just has to be the fans.
However, it was only 3 days after this that Semolina Wasp, a customer care worker at Anne's Fans, would assure Stu that fans 100% do not have the capacity to induce defecation in any individual by any means whatsoever. I have since corroborated this fact with an expert medical doctor who has assured me that this is indeed the case. Fans do not cause shits. I just can't say that enough in this. Following the call with Semolina, Stu sat for 3 hours, he tells me, stewing in his thoughts, and what I presume was his own memory of the stew he made that day with his bum. He realised during this time of deep contemplation that at the time of the incident he was far too preoccupied to notice his surroundings, so he cast his mind back like a fishing rod into a muddy lagoon, and soon he started to remember some extra details that had previously been overshadowed by the dread and the other aspects of the plot at the beginning. He remembered seeing his old schoolmate Terry standing by the exit of the store, teary-eyed and a face full of sheer shock. Perhaps he had repressed this memory, he thought. He'd assumed that Terry was teary because of Stu's feisty bum fountain, but now he's starting to think perhaps Terry was one of what Stu had now started to call the Tesco 3. Another few days had passed until it had been a week since the incident. A week wherein Stu would spend every waking hour wondering just what happened. He needed to know. Surely it was worth the embarrassment, he thought. But he figured it was probably impossible to play it cool during the call he was about to make. If Terry wasn't one of the Tesco 3, he thought, he was about to have one of the strangest calls of his life. Imagine seeing a man you knew from school violently shitting himself in public, only to be called up a week later by that same man, asking, what happened to you that day? But it was worth the risk, he thought. Stu hadn't spoken to Terry for ages, and they weren't by any means close. It was a bridge that he was prepared to burn, to answer his burning questions.
What? Hi, Terry. It happened to you too, didn't it? It did. I know it was horrible. I know. You left before you could see us all, but do you remember that guy we used to call Uncle Curry? It happened to him as well.
In this moment, their friendship found a new beginning. Terry would later be the best man at Stu's wedding, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because this is the moment that I enter the story, as more than a narrator, more than just a frustrated journalist, but as I like to think about it, a public saviour.
Can you believe it, Susan? Two people from the same year at school both shitting themselves at exactly the same time, at exactly the same place. It must be the fans, love. Despite what they said at the company, we gotta take down the fan company. Are you with me?
Said Stu, in a voice that could only be described as his own. I reassured Stu it was the right thing to do to call me, but he should probably listen to the fan company. Fans don't make people shit, I said, and I stand by that to this day.
But it must be a story,
Stu asked. I told him I was very busy that week. I was helping to raise money for sick children, and helping to heal sick children with my journalism. Journalism. I, of course, have never shat myself, not even as a child. Not that I can remember anyway. So I shed no embarrassment with any of my sources, of course. I was more than happy to phone everyone from Stu and Terry's school year, a few years above me when I was a nipper. I wanted to eliminate the possibility that their familiarity had anything to do with the incident. It couldn't be the fans, I thought, and it couldn't be anything to do with the fact that they went to school together. Surely, there had to be another link. But that was all I had. It was the only lead. Facebook message number 1. Tony, did you shit yourself at 3:49 Wednesday last month? It's for a story. Charlotte, did you shit yourself at 3:49 Wednesday last month? It's for a story. Malala, did you shit yourself at 3:49 Wednesday last month? It's for a story. No replies. I messaged dozens of people that day, all of whom I'd found on a Facebook alumni page. They should have been in the same year. It was a week later, when I was meditating on how I could use journalism to build bridges between different religions, when the first reply came.
I was at work. They can't know. It was around 3:49. But how did you know?
I was so busy with my meditation that I'd forgotten all of the material realm. I reshackled my earthly ego and reassembled myself from the ground up, with every atom exactly in its place, like a perfect representation of journalism in its purest form. Who, what, why, when and how, I said. I like to get those questions out of the way early to show that I'm professional, and so that I can then focus on more personal questions like, how did it make you feel? And where do you get your inspiration? And what are your next projects, etc.?
What?
She replied. She was clearly not smart enough to answer my questions fivefold in rapid succession as I'd hoped.
I shat myself at work. Exactly 3:49, actually. Am I not alone in this? I'm so embarrassed. Please don't tell anyone.
Sandra Kennedy's embarrassment was totally understandable. She had shat herself while at work, where she works at the View Cinema in Swansea. She had been brave to come forward. I'm using her name today to show that she doesn't need to be afraid. This is me, Sandra. I use journalism to make people feel better about themselves. If you're out there, Sandra, I just think you're great, alright? And I hope you find the courage to tell your co-workers that it was in fact you that messed up the storage cupboard where they keep the mops. And you should remind them that those mops would have been covered under the View Cinema's business insurance. So you shouldn't worry about the cost that was spent on hiring professional cleaners. Call me, by the way, love, if you want to catch up. Clean Anything and Son are a professional cleaning company based in Cheltenham. I was about to add some more confusion to their very confusing week.
You mean to tell me that the 3 people who shat themselves in Tesco and the woman who shat herself in the View Cinema where they kept the mops were all at the same year in school? Do you really think there's something going on here, love? Because we have had so many jobs related to defecation this week. We were beginning to think that it might have something to do with the fans.
It's not the fans, I told him again and again. But 10 minutes into the conversation, I'd of course won over his trust. And with the promise of a box of beer for the lads at Clean Anything and Son, we were now mates. And he told. Oh, did he tell?
You know, it wasn't just those 2 incidents though, right, love? We've had to hire more boys, I couldn't believe it. 3 of them quit. We hired 18 more people to cover all the jobs. 50 jobs in total, all poo-related. Like I said, we thought it must have had something to do with the fans. We didn't even think that they might have all been a similar age. I mean, why would you?
I assured him again about the fans. I begged him for the contacts he had, but he told me something about data protection, which I'm not sure is a thing. However, later that day, Ander Fivehands, who works at Clean Anything and Son, met me under promise of anonymity, behind the bins at Asda. He handed me a brown envelope with 50 names, one of which was, to my instant and gobsmacking horror, my husband, Handryer Warmfoot. I nearly shat myself. "You told me you were 37! I shouted at him.
Look, love, I'm a liar. I'm an ungrateful schmuck of a man. I've always been 39, for most of my life. There's one thing I can tell you though, love.
Which he did tell me.
I love you more now than the day I met you. And the day I shat myself had nothing to do with it, alright?
I believed him. And it was him, of course, who helped me fill in the blanks. And the story got much bigger. He knew pretty much everyone at his school year, of course he did. Most of whom had already added him on Facebook. Shocked, of course, probably, to see how lucky he was to end up marrying such a beaut like me. Together we checked, and they were still on Facebook and hadn't blocked him out of jealousy, which was a serious concern of ours. We had Philip Pintglass, Uncle Curry, Philip Andra, Nose Casserole, Tenby Evans, all 1 to 5 clicks away. They were all on Facebook, of course, but they hadn't replied. Thankfully, my husband Handryer has a way with words.
Please tell me that you shat yourself last month. I also shat myself. I just want to know if we shat ourselves at exactly the same time.
It must have been his unique approach to language, because this time things were different. We got so many replies, it was like the chocolate fountain all over again, but this time with replies instead of hot bum brine. Facebook messages.
I admit it.
I'm a dirty bastard and I hate myself.
My wife left me because of it. Please tell me I'm not alone. I'm so close to the edge. People have started calling me Uncle Curry again, but for reasons now that are way worse.
After 3 weeks I replied and asked if I could use these people in the story. I assured them that it wasn't the fans. They were not alone. Those that chose to reply were instantly relieved, of course. Hesitant to be part of the story, but by this point it had grown into something else, and I just had to publish. Today is the 5th of August 2019. I have spent the last 3 weeks interviewing as many of the 4,163 students that I possibly can. It has become clear now that this was more than just an isolated incident. Tina Hungry Thumbs was in New York when she shat herself all over her kids while queuing at the bank. Hitler Mansell was about to step off a plane in Tenerife when he caused the stewardesses to speed up the process by releasing the evacuation slides in a hurried and frantic effort to escape the smell of his shitting himself. Hawaii Pianos for Sale was buying jeans. Andrew Mice for dinner was at his kids' school play. Fernandrew Handrew was giving a driving lesson to his new student. And Need for Speed Underground 2 was meeting his girlfriend's parents for the second time. He was eager to make up for last time when he shat himself after drinking his soon-to-be father-in-law's 40-year-old scotch, somehow managing to get some diarrhea into the remaining bottle. His girlfriend's father had reassured him that it was fine and that these things are a one-off. The stories were many, the stories were incredible, and truthfully we were no closer to understanding the meaning, the time or the reason for the incident. It is my personal opinion that this may be an act of God, a reminder to the school year in question that they should be prepared for anything. That is how I chose to end the article I published last year. This is what I believed at the time. This is, of course, until last week, when I received a very strange phone call from an old professor of mine, Jean Lavoisier, an awesome French guy that used to have tits, that he had something that he wanted to share with me before he passed, and he told me it was going to be soon. So without hesitation, I dived into the journalism mobile, and no care was given to my brand new McLaren tyres that helped get me there as quickly as they possibly could. On the way over, it occurred to me that it must have something to do with the fact that I was his only student to ever combine chemistry and journalism successfully. As I got there, his face looked like a dying old man. But he still looked good for his age. I was mid-sentence trying to compliment his brand new tits when he cut me off so that he would not die mid-sentence.
My boy, I don't remember you very well from school, but come closer to me, boy. It was for the government. They wanted to know how to control mass hysteria. They were experimenting with something called the brown note, a tone that could somehow make people boo themselves. They came to me to see if they could be turned into some kind of chemical weapon. I told them that sound and chemicals were very different things, but they assured me that I would try. And you know what, boy? Come, look at my dying old eyes. Take one last grope of my tits. Look at me, boy. My wife is gone. You're all that I've got left. You know what, boy? I thought I'd failed. It was supposed to be instant, you see. I was gonna show the government. I was gonna show them that I could make a whole school just shit themselves. And if I could do that, then what couldn't I do, eh? I wanted to move on from being a teacher and do something with my capable chemistry capabilities. I've spent the last 20 years feeling like a failure. But now I could so happy knowing that I made a whole school year shit themselves. Better late than never, eh?
He died in my arms that day. I'm so glad I got that recording of him. The man who made a whole school year shit themselves. I hope that one day he'll be recognised for his achievements. And I hope that this radio show goes some way towards giving those 4,163 students respite from the trauma. This fair journalist has a limited scope. She only gets the power to change this world one fucking story at a time. Stu later got married to a shopping basket, giving the incredible role of best man to, yes, you guessed it, Terry. Knowles turned out to be the bridesmaid as well, which is funny, because I always thought Knowles was a guy. Apparently she knows shopping basket from back when she used to work at Tesco. Or did she just say that she nosed? Anyway, but that was way before any of this started, and I think it even used to be a Tesco Metro back then.